Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Retail Insider. Joining me today is Emma May, who is owner of women's wear retailer Sophie Grace. Thanks for joining us today, Emma.
Thanks, Mario. Nice to be here.
All right, so tell me, how does a lawyer and a real estate agent become a retailer?
Because she's crazy. No. uh, well, basically, I was standing in my closet one morning on the way to a board meeting, and I decided that women needed a little more mix and match coordinated separates in their wardrobe to make getting ready for work really, really simple for working women. Guys throw on a suit. It's a little more complicated for women. There's all these other decision trees that end up going into it. Is it too sexy? Is it too short? Is it professional enough? Can I be taken seriously? All those things.
So before we get into a little bit more about Sophie's Grace, I want to talk a little bit about your background and your two careers. Let's start with three now. Yeah. Let's talk about law. Tell me a little bit about your background in law, how you got into law initially.
Well, I was 24 when I went to law school, so my mother had actually been a lawyer. She'd been one of the first female partners at a big law firm in Calgary, actually BDP, maybe second female partner, actually, I think it was. But so I'd kind of been steeped in it my entire life, and I liked reading, and that's kind of what you do as a lawyer. Not so much arguing, that wasn't really up my ballywick, but yeah, ended up getting into law, did a lot of entertainment law, actually. So film finance, that kind of thing, working with, sort of union contracts, other contracts, IP law, and then just sort of commercial stuff. So that was really where I practiced for a period of time. And, but then I had two kids. So they were busy, and my husband was also a lawyer, and the billable hour structure was a bit insane. So I decided after about 10 years of that it wasn't something that I could keep up doing, and continue to be the mom that I wanted to be. And it wasn't really that, I wasn't loving it that much. So I decided to move. That's when I decided to move into real estate. And
talk a little bit about real estate and what you do there. And you still do some real estate.
I still have an interest in it. So I became a residential realtor. I was on the, I was in the, I was pretty deep in the community. Like I was the mom on the school, the school council. I walked my kids to school every day. I knew everybody in the hood, Mrs. Chatty, like, yeah, type A, all of that stuff. And so I decided, when I needed to sort of continue to have a career, but didn't want something that was as grinding as the billable hour had been, that real estate was a good move for me, because I had sort of the social component locked up, and I knew also, how to negotiate a contract, how to deal with transactions, all of the complexity that kind of comes with that. So I went into that, and it was pretty, it was fun. And after about 2 years, I founded a brokerage called Charles Real Estate, and it's a local boutique brokerage. And the whole concept behind that was, how do we bring sort of this real professional service, much like you would have with a banker or your, doctor, into real estate, and then pair that with really beautiful marketing. And so Charles is doing great. I think it's up to almost 70 realtors now. So I still have it. So I still have an interest in Charles. It's run day to day by Andy Jackson, who's amazing. So he's our broker there. So he's doing that. But I think that also sort of snapped the entrepreneurial bug in me too, right? It was like, hey, this is kind of cool. Why don't we do this? Yeah. So that was, so that was a bit of a journey.
Okay, let's talk about Sophie Grace. When did it start?
So I came up with the original idea in 2019. And then I was pretty clear on what it was that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to do a collection of modular clothes that were sort of similar color palettes, very straightforward, that women could then go into their closet and mix and match. So here's your blazer, here's your pant, here's your blouses, here's some skirts. And then, you don't need to spend all this time worrying about styling it in the morning. It's just going to like all kind of work together. So I had a pretty clear vision around what it was that I wanted to do. And then what I did was I needed to find people who actually knew how to make clothes. So I reached out to some people I knew in Vancouver, and I ended up finding, she's not my partner, but I hired her, and she was a former Lululemon product developer, and she'd been with the Gap as well. And so she and I spent then 18 months working together on, what were the styles that we wanted to do, designing those styles, sourcing fabrics, what were the fabrics that we wanted. We wanted to make things really comfortable. We wanted simplicity in the design and style. So we spent quite a bit of time going over sort of all of that in order to execute something that actually locked together in a really beautiful way. And Lisa continues, she's still head of product with me to this day. So we launched my workwear collection in January of 2020, which was just really epic timing to launch something that was focused on going into the office when the pandemic hit 2 months later and no one needed to go into the office.
How did you get through that period?
I think there was a panic attack and a brain seizure in over the past couple of years. A few hospital visits. So it was stressful. It was stressful. How did we get through it? At the end of the day, we'd done really good product, right? And so even though there wasn't a crushing need, the customers who knew someday they'd be back in the office, or who were doing things like what I'm doing right now, which is sitting on a Zoom call with you with one of our blouses on, people still, there were a lot of people who still kind of knew that they needed things, right? Like, we have a lot of lawyers, and a lot of lawyers were attending court online, still needed to show up and look super professional. We have a lot of CEOs, they were still running their companies. Doctors actually are big customers for us. Wow. Because a lot of our stuff is super, super comfortable, our fabrics. So we ended up finding our customer, who was this incredible, professional woman, right? And she's just really busy. She doesn't have a ton of time to spend on this, but she knows she needs to show up and look good, look professional. And so, it was hard. A lot of our original marketing strategies had actually been around going into workplaces, right? And going to where our customer was, because we knew she's not someone who's hanging out in the mall all day long. She's someone who's at work. And so it was like, hit the lobbies, hit the boardrooms, really conferences, really go to where she was. And all of that all of a sudden was unavailable to us. So we really had to lean into just being online, right? And how it was that we were going to reach our customers there.
So your presence from a physical standpoint, can you explain, first of all, I believe in our conversations in the past, you're more of a showroom than a quote unquote store. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that and where you're at as well?
Yeah. So, we are what I call a digitally native brand, which is that ultimately we live on the internet, right? So we do have a store location in Vancouver, and that's also it's in Mount Pleasant. And so that's like just off the Canby corridor. So we've got a store there. We've got then shipping, design, and our warehouse. So everything sort of comes out of there, in that sense. In Calgary, we have marketing, finance, and a showroom with our stylist, Carl. And so that's like a by appointment showroom. And then women can come in, and what they really appreciate there is it's like a one-on-one for half an hour or an hour with our stylist, who really, it's not like some teenager telling you what to wear. It's someone who spent 20 years as a professional stylist to professional people. And he knows exactly what the challenges are that, these women are facing. So he helps them navigate, what is it that works for you? Maybe a lot of our collection doesn't work for you, but we can help sort of that conversation around how is it that we make life easy for you to showing up looking really good.
All right, super. So when you look back on things, your careers in law and in real estate, how do you think those helped you today in what you're doing as a retailer?
Yeah, well, I think the career in law really is a foundational point of understanding who my customer is and what she wants, right? Like I've spent 20 years as a working professional woman. As you know, I worked in the Premier's office in Alberta. So I know what it means to show up into meetings full of like male executives and CEOs, and they're all wearing their, nice black and white suits. And, you've got to pull together something that's, that makes you feel like yourself, like you're not wearing, a mask, and yet at the same time, be comfortable and convey professionalism and all of these things. And like I said, it's just infinitely more complicated for women in terms of the decision tree of how to present. So I think that really is the foundational key of spending a whole bunch of time in that and understanding what that customer needs and what she's looking for. In terms of like the real estate component, really it's sales, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like, how do I put together something that's how do we market to people?
Yeah.
And so I'm combining kind of those things into this experience of being like, I know how to sell stuff too, right? And ultimately it's about being able to sort of present the story to the customer and then have her like it. Right.
Yeah.
And beyond that is, I've been a fashionista not a fashionista, I wouldn't say that, but I've been into clothes my entire life. Like I remember being 15 years old and borrowing somebody's outfit and being like, oh my God, I feel like my best self today. Right. And how that could really transform your confidence level of when you're wearing something that you feel really great about. And I designed my own grad dress when I was 18. Right. So that's been sort of a core of my life. And I understand what quality is in terms of that. And that's what I'm really, and so we know how to make great product too.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the clothes aspects in a second, but just to go back, you mentioned being in the Premier's office. Tell me a little bit about that for our listeners out there.
Yeah. So when I was working in real estate, we had it was in 2013, and we had a massive flood in the city of Calgary. And, entire communities were sort of devastated. The entire, like the downtown core was flooded, the Saddle Dome, the City Hall, Stampede Grounds. And the government at the time, I think Alison Redford was premier, and they came out with sort of this policy that was like, too bad for you, you live in the floodplain. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make sense because we've all built in the floodplain. We've been building in the floodplain for, 40 years. This is a collective mistake. So to pass this on to residents to whom you've issued building permits is bullshit. And so I became a community advocate, saying, look, what we really need to do is mitigate this problem, as cities who, live on rivers around the world do, is they have mitigation structures in place. So what that led to then was a lot of advocacy with the Premier's office. And then when Jim Prentice, I'd been advocating to him when he won the leadership, and when he came into power, had several meetings with him. And then he was like, maybe you should just come work for me. So that translated into me going in as executive director of the office of the Premier in Southern Alberta. And so I'd worked for him for that period of time, and it was phenomenal. He was an incredible brain, an incredible manager, and someone who just knew, seriously, like a technocrat, right? Like knew every file inside and out.
Super. Close. A couple of things I wanted to ask you about, when it comes to clothes. I've been having this discussion with one of my best friends, and he goes crazy about what's happening out there in the business world, becoming more casual, becoming more, as he calls it, slovenly, right? Out there, with casual Fridays, which started a long time ago. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the business world has become a lot more casual and relaxed in what it's wearing, what people are wearing today?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it has. And there's, and this sort of comes into this idea of like, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like for so many years, having that, having the suit that so many men sort of wore to work, right? It was like, I mean, I think about like Barack Obama, right? When he wore the tan suit and what a shit show it was. And when he wore his, and after that, what he said to his team was, you know what? Prada suit, white shirt. That's all I want. That's all that's going to live in my closet. And what he knew from that was that when he showed up every day, he didn't have to think about it, right? So there was no executive decision making being spent having to think about what it was that he was going to wear. He was literally just going to put the same thing on and always show up and look great. Yeah. And I think that's where like your friend's stress is coming from, is that people are not stylists, right? Like most people don't have an interest in fashion. Most people don't have an interest in style. And that's not a gendered thing either, right? Like a lot of women don't, as well as men. And so for a lot of men, sort of the suit idea was always it was like, I just have to do this and I know I'm going to be okay. And I think in some ways, what we're trying to create here is this, we're going to give you these pieces that you can wear casually, right? Because our stuff is a lot of our pant, like the main fabric we use is incredibly stretchy and machine washable. But what we do is we create very simple styles. We don't use a ton of patterns, and we make sure everything coordinates really, really well. So you could like close your eyes and pick things from our collection and walk out the door and be super coordinated and put together. And I think that's that tension. It's not so much about whether it's casual or not. It's about people don't necessarily know how to style something casual in the same way that having that suit was a very easy go-to, and this is appropriate sort of idea, right? So I'm not actually I think sometimes casual is super cool, right? But it's like, oh, flip-flops down the hall, right? Like just
I guess there's a difference between casual and wearing Crocs around or
I'm so into Crocs right now. Don't get me
started. Me too, actually.
Yeah. And they're back in style. You should have seen Copenhagen.
I know,
everybody's wearing them.
You know what's really weird? I love wearing them because of the comfort, but I met my friend for lunch one day and he gave me hell for wearing Crocs in public, right? And then I started texting him photos of all these stores selling Crocs, right?
Yeah.
At a high price, right?
Totally.
and seeing young ladies wearing them. So anyways, but the other part I wanted to ask you about clothes, and you mentioned it about feeling good, when you were younger and trying out some stuff. I had another friend who always had to look good and dress well, because whether it was on a Zoom call like this or just going into a meeting with anybody, even a casual meeting, his philosophy was this. He says, it's game day. I'm putting on my uniform, going out onto Yankee Stadium field.
Totally.
Is that what clothes do for somebody?
Yeah, I think it is. It's like, and sometimes it's difficult because you don't want to wear stuff that you're not comfortable in, right? Like I cannot deal with pantyhose. I will not wrap the lower half of my body in a thin film of nylon and spend the rest of the day. Like I just won't do it. But so for me, pants is, it was sort of where I would gravitate to. But yes, I had this, when I was in the Premier's office, I would wear a silk black shirt, much like this one that we've made. Mine's better, just saying. And almost a menswear style trouser. And I found that when I wore that, I felt strong, simple, myself, and yet still totally professional, right? And totally up for whatever was going to be thrown at me. It was like my Barack Obama perfect black suit, right? And I do think it matters. I think it matters to that idea of like dress for the job you want, right? I do think once you're sort of in a position that you kind of control your own world and it doesn't matter as much, then you're not, you have the choice, but it's those power structure things, right? And so you want to show up and look like you could be the boss, right? And you want the boss's job, you want that next thing. And it's also about respect, right? Like when you show up and you look like you've taken the time to pull yourself together. And that doesn't necessarily mean things need to be expensive, right? Like you can go, I found like you can go into Latin America and drive by, you know, in some ways what looks like very, you know, very low income housing and things. And, you know, the kids are coming out of there with pressed white shirts and perfect shorts, clean shorts, and off to school,
Yeah.
you know, and they don't have 5 shirts, they have 1 or 2, and they take incredible care of them, and they present really beautifully. And that's sort of that idea too around sort of this, you know, the capsule wardrobe, the French style dressing, which is that you don't need a million things. You just need really great, simple things of good quality that are going to last you for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was super, Emma. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mario. Really appreciate it. Great to chat. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, too. That was Emma May, who is owner of SophieGrace in Calgary. I'm based in Calgary as well. I'm Mario Toneguzzi with Retail Insider. Thanks for joining us today.